The Watsons go to Birmingham, 1963. So the next story we're going to read, it's going to teach us a lot about the history of civil rights, even though it's a fictional story. So what do we know about the civil rights? Civil rights are the rights of citizens to freedoms and equality. This story is a work of historical fiction that tells the story of an African American family, the Watsons, who live in Flint, Michigan. So the book was written by Christoph Paul Curtis, who grew up in Flint. The story is told from the point of view of Kenny, who's a fourth grader. Kenny has an older brother, Byron, or By for short, and a sister who's in kindergarten. Her name is Joetta, though they call her Joey. So keep in mind the times. So we're talking about how African Americans were not treated fairly during this time. So you're going to see references to colored bathrooms, right? Because they used to segregate. White people had their own bathroom and black people had their own bathroom. But they weren't really equal. Not really treated fairly, right? And we're also going to see some references in this chapter where the father is talking about someone from the mother's past, and he's going to make some comments, like an impression of the guy, and talk about Chinese folks, which is kind of also racist too, but he is pretending to be this guy and talking like this guy. So you're going to see the author's craft here, where you're going to see some language that isn't the most appropriate, but the author's trying to make them sound like real people who are having real conversations. Okay, so again, fiction, we know that this family did not actually exist, but the things that happened to them were typical things that really did happen to people during this time. Okay? So I want to show you a little picture or a map rather, of the family so we can help keep this straight. So we have father and mother, Byron, or By, Kenny, and Joey. So this story is going to be in first person because Kenny is our narrator. We're going to get to see all of Kenny's thoughts and feelings, but we're not going to know the thoughts and feelings of the other characters. Okay, so one of the interesting things about this book is that the chapters not only have numbers, they have titles, and you're going to see that the titles are very strange, but as we read the chapter, it's going to make sense after all. So in this first chapter, we're going to meet all of the main characters. Think about which one you find most interesting and why, and I'll give you a chance to share your choices with me later so we can write about them together. And we get started on this first page here. I want you to think about what it's like to be really, really cold. Okay? And as I read the first few sentences, I want you to think about how the author is using language to create that visual image of what it's like to walk along in cold weather. Okay? So, chapter 1. And you wonder why we get called the Weird Watsons. It was one of those super duper cold Saturdays. One of those days that when you breathe out, your breath kind of hung frozen in the air like a hunk of smoke, and you could walk along and look exactly like a train blowing out a big, fat, white puffs of smoke. It was so cold that if you were stupid enough to go outside, your eyes would automatically blink 1,000 times, all by themselves, probably so the juice inside them wouldn't freeze up. It was so cold that if you spit, the slob would be an ice cube before it hit the ground. It was about a zillion degrees below zero. It was even cold inside our house. We put sweaters and hats and scarves and 3 pairs of socks on and still were cold. The thermostat was turned all the way up and the furnace was banging and sounding like it was about to blow up, but it still felt like Jack Frost had moved in with us. So, were you able to picture how cold that is in your mind's eye? All of my family sat real close together on the couch under a blanket. Dad said this would generate a little heat, but he didn't have to tell us this. It seemed like the cold automatically made us want to get together and huddle up. My sister Joetta sat in the middle, and all you could see were her eyes because she had a scarf wrapped around her head. I was next to her, and on the outside was my mother. Mama was the only one who wasn't born in Flint, so the cold was coldest to her. All you could see were her eyes, too, and they were shooting bad looks at Dad. She always blamed him for bringing her all the way from Alabama to Michigan, a state she called a giant icebox. Dad was bundled up on the other side of Joey, trying to look at anything but Mama. Next to Dad, sitting was a little space between them, was my older brother Byron. Byron had just turned 13, so he was officially a teenage juvenile delinquent and didn't think it was cool to touch anybody or let anyone touch him, even if it meant he froze to death. Byron had tucked the blanket between him and Dad down on the cushion of the couch to make sure he couldn't be touched. So why do you think it's so cold in their house? Dad turned on the TV to try to make us forget how cold we were, but all that did was get him in trouble. There was a special news report on Channel 12 telling about how bad the weather was. Dad groaned when the guy said, "If you think it's cold now, wait until tonight. The temperature is expected to drop into the record low territory, possibly reaching the negative 20s. In fact, we won't be seeing anything above zero for the next 4 to 5 days." He was smiling. When he said this, but none of the Watson family thought it was funny. We all looked over at Dad. He just shook his head and pulled a blanket over his eyes. Then the guy on TV said, "Oh, blurry. Hold on. There we go." Then the guy on the TV said, "Here's a little something we can use to brighten our spirits and give us some hope for the future. The temperature in Atlanta, Georgia is forecast to reach..." Dad coughed real loud and jumped off the couch to turn the TV off, but we all heard the weatherman say, "The mid-70s." The guy might as well have tied Dad to a tree and said, "Ready, aim, fire." "Atlanta," Mama said. "That's 150 miles from home." "Walona," Dad said. "I knew it," Mama said. "I knew I should have listened to Moses Henderson." "Who?" I asked. Dad said, "Oh, Lord, not that sorry story. You gotta let me tell about what happened to him." Mama said, "There's not a whole lot to tell, just a story about a young girl who made a bad choice. But if you do tell it, make sure you get all the facts right." We all huddled as close as we could get because we knew Dad was going to try to make us forget about being cold by cutting up. Me and Joey started smiling right away, and Byron tried to look cool and bored. "Kids," Dad said, "I almost wasn't your father. You guys came real close to having a clown for a daddy named Hambone Henderson. Daniel Watson, you stop right there. You're the one who started that Hambone nonsense. Before you started that, everyone called him his Christian name, Moses. And he was a respectable boy, too. He wasn't a clown at all. But the name stuck, didn't it? Hambone Henderson. Me and your granddaddy called him that because the boy had a head shaped like a ham bone. He had more knots and bumps on his head than a dinosaur. So as you guys sit here giving me these dirty looks because it's a little chilly outside, ask yourselves if you'd rather be a little cool or go through life being known as Hambonuts." So, why is the father making up this insulting nickname like Hambone? Me and Joey cracked up. Byron kind of chuckled, and Mama put her hand over her mouth. She did this whenever she was giving a smile because she had a great big gap between her front teeth. If Mama thought something was funny, first you'd see her trying to keep her lips together and hide the gap. Then, if the smile got to be too strong, you'd see the gap for a hot second before Mama's hand would come up to cover it. Then she'd crack up too. Laughing only encouraged Dad to cut up more. So when he saw the whole family thinking he was funny, he really started putting on a show. He stood in front of the TV. Yup, Hambone Henderson proposed to your mother around the same time I did. Fought dirty, too. Told your mama a pack of lies about me, and when she didn't believe them, he told her a pack of lies about Flint. Dad started talking Southern style, imitating this Hambone guy. Make this a little clearer here. Well, Lona, I heard tell about the weather up that far north in Flint, Michigan. Heard it's colder than inside an icebox. Seen a movie about it. Think it was made in Flint. Movie called Nanhook of the North. Yup, do believe for sure it was made in Flint. Flint, Michigan. Folks there live in these things called igloos. According to what I seen in this here movie, most folks in Flint is Chinese. Don't believe I seen now one colored person in this whole dang city. You a Bama girl. Don't believe you'd be too happy living in no igloo. Ain't got nothing against 'em, but don't believe you'd be too happy living amongst a whole slew of Chinese folks. Don't believe you'd like the food. Only thing them Chinese folks in that movie set ate was whales and seals. Don't believe you'd like no whale meat. Don't taste a lick like chicken. Don't taste like pork at all. Mama pulled her hand away from her mouth. Daniel Watson, you are one lying man. Only thing you said that was true was that being in Flint is like living in an igloo. I knew I should have listened to Moses. Maybe these babies might have been born with lumpy heads, but at least they'd had warm lumpy heads. So remember, Dad was making fun of this guy, so that's why he was talking that way, in that insulting way, because he was trying to make the other guy look bad, right? And Mom is saying he's lying. He didn't really see these things. You know, Birmingham is a good place, and I don't mean just the weather either. The life is slower, the people are friendlier. Oh yeah, Dad interrupted. They're a laugh a minute down there. Let's see, where was that colored-only bathroom downtown? Daniel, you know what I mean. Things aren't perfect. But people are more honest about the way they feel. She took her mean eyes off Dad and put them on Byron. And folks there do know how to respect their parents. Byron rolled his eyes like he didn't care. All he did was tuck the blanket farther into the couch cushion. Dad didn't like the direction the conversation was going, so he called the landlord for the 100th time. The phone was still busy. That snake in the grass has got his phone off the hook. Well, it's going to be too cold to stay here tonight. Let me call Cindy. She would just have that new furnace put in. Maybe we can spend the night there. Aunt Cindy was kind of mean, but her house was always warm, so we kept our fingers crossed that she was home. Everyone, even Byron, cheered when Dad got Aunt Cindy and told us to hurry over before we froze to death. Dad went out to try to get the brown bomber started. That was what we called our car. It was the 1948 Plymouth that was dull brown and real big. Byron said it was turd brown. Uncle Bud gave it to Dad when he was 13 years old, and we'd had it for 2 years. Me and Dad took real good care of it, but some of the time it didn't like to start up in the winter. So the Brown Bomber is a nickname for a heavyweight boxing champion, Joe Louis. So in both cases, the bomber is a metaphor, an example of figurative language where you're saying one thing is something else. Okay. After 5 minutes, Dad came back in huffing and puffing and slapping his arms across his chest. Well, it was a touch and go for a while, but the great brown one pulled through again. Everyone cheered. But me and Byron quit cheering and started frowning right away. By the way Dad smiled at us, we knew what was coming next. Hold on. Dad pulled 2 ice scrapers out of his pocket and said, "Okay, boys, let's get out there and knock those windows out." We moaned and groaned and put some more coats on and went outside to scrape the car's windows. I could tell by the way he was pouting that Byron was going to try to get out of doing his share of the work. "I'm not going to do your part, Byron. You'd better do it, and I'm not playing either." "Shut up, punk." I went over to the brown bomber's passenger side and started hacking away at the scab of ice that was all over the windows. I finished Mama's window and took a break. Scraping ice off of windows when it's that cold can kill you. So, Kenny calls the ice on the window a scab. That's an unusual word to use, but I think it fits. It's a good use of language. I didn't hear any sound coming from the other side of the car, so I yelled out, "I'm serious, Byron. I'm not doing that side too. And I'm only going to do half the windshield. I don't care what you do to me." The windshield on the bomber wasn't like the new 1963 cars. It had a big bar running down the middle of it, dividing it in half. "Shut your stupid mouth. I got something more important to do right now." I peeked around the back of the car to see what By was up to. The only thing he'd scraped off was the outside mirror, and he was bending down to look at himself in it. He saw me and said, "You know what, Square? I must be adopted. There just ain't no way 2 folks as ugly as your mama and daddy could have give birth to someone as sharp as me." He was running his hands over his head like he was brushing his hair. I said, "Forget you," and went back over to the other side of the car to finish the back window. I had half of the ice off when I had to stop again and catch my breath. I heard Byron mumble my name. I said, "You think I'm stupid? It's not gonna work this time." He mumbled my name again. It sounded like his mouth was full of something. I knew this was a trick. I knew this was going to be How to Survive a Blizzard Part 2. How to Survive a Blizzard Part 1 had been last night when I was outside playing in the snow and Byron and his running buddy Bubhead came walking by. Bubhead has officially been a juvenile delinquent even longer than Byron. "Say, kid," By had said, "you want to learn something that might save your stupid life one day?" I should have known better, but I was bored and I think maybe the cold weather was making my brain slow, so I said, "What's that?" "We're going to teach you how to survive a blizzard." "How?" Byron put his hands in front of his face and said, "This is the most important thing to remember, okay?" "Why?" "Well, first we gotta show you what it feels like to be trapped in a blizzard. You ready?" He whispered something to Bubhead and they both laughed. "I'm ready." I should have known that the only reason Bubhead and By would want to play with me was to do something mean. "Okay," By said. "First thing you gotta worry about is high winds." Byron and Bubhead each grabbed one of my arms and one of my legs and swung me between them, going, "Woo, blizzard warning, blizzard warnings, woo, take cover." Bubhead counted to 3, and on the 3rd swing, they let me go in the air. I landed headfirst in a snowbank. But that was okay, because I had on 3 coats, 2 sweaters, a t-shirt, 3 pairs of pants, and 4 socks along with a scarf, a hat, and hood. These guys couldn't have hurt me if they'd thrown me off the Empire State Building. After I climbed out of the snowbank, they started laughing, and so did I. "Cool baby bro," By said. "You passed the part of the test with a B-." "What do you think, Bubhead?" Bubhead said, "Yeah, I'd give the little punk an A." They whispered some more and started laughing again. "Okay," By said. "Second thing you gotta learn is how to keep your balance in a high wind. You gotta be good at this so you won't get blowed into no polar bear dens. They put me in between them and started making me spin round and round. It seemed like they spun me for about half an hour. When slobs started flying out of my mouth, they let me stop, and I wobbled around for a while before they pushed me back in the same snowbank. When everything stopped going in circles, I got up and we all laughed again. They whispered some more, and then Vi said, "What you think, Buckhead?" He kept his balance a good long time. I'm going to give him an A minus. I ain't as hard a grader as you. I'm going to give a little punk a double A minus. Okay, Kenny. Now, the last part of surviving a blizzard. You ready? Yup. You passed the wind test and did a real good job on the balance test, but now we got to see if you're ready to graduate. You remember what we told you was the most important part about surviving? Yep. Okay, here we go. Buckhead, tell him about the final exam. Buckhead turned me around to look at him, putting my back to Byron. Okay, Square, he started. I want to make sure you're ready for this one. You done so good so far. I want to make sure you don't blow it at graduation time. You think you're ready? I nodded, getting ready to be thrown in the snowbank real hard this time. I made up my mind I wasn't going to cry or anything. I made up my mind that no matter how hard they threw me in that snow, I was going to get up laughing. Okay, Buckhead said. Everything's cool. You remember what your brother said about putting your hands up? Like this. I covered my face with my gloves. Yeah, that's it. Buckhead looked over my shoulder at Byron, and then he said, Woo, high winds, blowing snow. Woo, look out. Blizzards are coming. Death around the corner. Look out. Byron mumbled my name, and I turned around to see why his voice sounded so funny. As soon as I looked at him, Byron blasted me in the face with a mouthful of snow. Man, it was hard to believe how much stuff By could put in his mouth. Him and Buckhead just about died laughing as soon as I stood there with snow and spit and ice dripping off my face. Byron caught his breath and said, Aw, man, you flunked. You done so good. Then you go and flunk the blowin' snow section of How to Survive a Blizzard. You forgot to put your hands up. What'd you say, Buckhead? F? Yeah, double F minus. So we are learning more about the characters from what they say and do. Think about Byron. Do you think Byron and his friends were being mean or just playful teasing? Talk it over with partner. It was a good thing my face was numb from the cold. Already, or I might have froze to death. I was too embarrassed about getting tricked to tell on them, so I went in the house and watched TV. So, as me and Bai scraped the ice off the brown bomber, I wasn't going to get fooled again. I kept on chopping ice off the back window and ignored Bai's mumbling voice. The next time I took a little rest, Byron was still calling my name, but sounded like he had something in his mouth. He was saying, Kay, help. Then he started banging on the door of the car, and I went to take a peek at what was going on. Bai was leaned over the outside mirror, looking at something in it real close. Big puffs of steam were coming out of the side of the mirror. I picked up a big, hard chunk of ice to get ready for Byron's trick. Kay, help me. Go get Mama. Go get Mama. Hurry up. I'm not playing, Byron. I'm not that stupid. You better start doing your side of the car or I'll tear you up with this ice ball. He banged his hands against the car harder and started stomping his feet. Oh, please, can you help me? Go get Mama. I raised my ice chunk over my head. I'm not playing, Bai. You better get busy or I'm telling Dad. I moved closer, and when I got right next to him, I could see boogers running out his nose and tears running down his cheeks. Those weren't tears from the cold either. They were big, juicy crybaby tears. I dropped my ice chunk. Bye, what's wrong? Help me, Kenny. Oh, yeah, help. So, why do we think that Byron was mumbling his name? Um, why did he think that Byron was mumbling his name? It was just another part of the blizzard test. I moved closer. I couldn't believe my eyes. Byron's mouth was frozen on the mirror. He was as stuck as a fly on a fly paper. I could have done a lot of stuff to him. If it had been me with my lips stuck on something like this, he'd have tortured me for a couple of days before he got help. Not me, though. I nearly broke my neck trying to get into the house to rescue Byron. As soon as I ran through the front door, Mama, Dad, and Joey all yelled, "Close that door! Mama, quick, it's By. He's froze up outside." No one seemed too impressed. I screamed, "Really, he's froze to the car. Help, he's crying." That shook them up. You could cut Byron's head off and he probably wouldn't cry. Kenneth Bernard Watson, what on earth are you talking about? Mama, please, hurry up. Mama, Dad, and Joey threw on some extra coats and followed me to the brown bomber. The fly was still stuck and buzzing. "Oh, Mama, help me. Get me off of here." "Oh, my Lord," Mama screamed, and I thought, she was going to do one of those movie-style faints. She even put her hand over her forehead and staggered back a little bit. Joey, of course, started crying right along with Byron. Dad was doing his best not to explode laughing. Big puffs of smoke were coming out of his nose and mouth as he tried to squeeze his laughs down. Finally, he put his head on his arms and leaned against the car's hood and howled. "Byron," Mama said, gently wiping tears off his cheeks with the end of her scarf. "It's okay, sweetheart. How this happened?" She sounded like she was going to be crying in a minute herself. Dad raised his head and said, "Why are you asking how it happened? Can't you tell? Well, now, this little knucklehead was kissing his reflection in the mirror and got his lips stuck." Dad took a real deep breath. "Is your tongue stuck too?" "No, quit teasing. Daddy, help, help." Well, at least the boy hadn't gotten too passionate with himself. Dad thought that was hilarious and put his head back on his arms. Mama didn't see anything funny. "Daniel Watson, what are we going to do? What do y'all do when this happens up here?" Mama started talking Southern style when she got worried. Instead of saying here, she said here. And instead of you all, she said y'all. Dad stopped laughing long enough to say, "Malona, I've lived in Flint all my life, 35 years, and I swear this is the first time I've ever seen anyone with their lips frozen to a mirror. Honey, I don't know what to do. Wait until he thaws out?" How many of you think that it was all right for the father to be cracking jokes while Byron was stuck to the mirror? "Pull him off, Dad," I suggested. Byron went nuts. He started banging his hands on the brown bomber's doors again and mumbling, "No, no, Mama, don't let him." Joey blubbered out, "This is just like the horrible story Kenny read me about the guy Narcissi, who stared at himself so long that he forgot to eat and starved to death. Mommy, please save him." She went over and hugged her arms around stupid Byron's waist. Mama asked Dad, "What about hot water? Couldn't we pour enough hot water on the mirror so it would warm up and he could get off?" She kept wiping tears off By's cheeks and said, "Don't you worry, baby. We're going to get you off this. But her voice was so shaky and southern that I wondered if we'd be driving around in the summer with the skeleton dangling from the outside mirror by its lips. Dad said, "I don't know. Pouring water on him might be the worst thing to do, but it might be our only chance. Why don't you go get some hot tap water and I'll stay to wipe his cheeks?" Joey told By, "Don't worry, we'll come right back." She stood on her tiptoes and gave By a kiss, and then she and Mama ran inside. Dad cracked up all over again. "Well, lover boy, I guess this means no one can call you Hot Lips, can they?" Dad was killing himself. Or the last of the red-hot lovers either. He tugged on Byron's little ear a little, pulling his face back. Vi went nuts again. Don't do that. Mama, Mama, help. Kenny, go get Mama, Howie. I guess that's not going to work, is it? Every time he wiped away the tears and the little mustache of boogers on Byron's lip, Dad couldn't help laughing, until a little river of tears was coming out of his eyes, too. Dad tried to straighten his face out when Mama and Joey came running back with a steaming glass of hot water, but the tears were still running down his cheeks. Mama tried to pour water on the mirror, but her hands were shaking so much she was splashing it all over the place. Dad tried too, but he couldn't look at Byron without laughing and shaking. That meant I had to do it.